Dean Martin challenged John Wayne to a shooting contest on a Western movie set. What happened next shocked everyone and proved that sometimes the most dangerous gunslinger is the one who doesn't look like a cowboy at all. It was August 15, 1968, and the sprawling backlot of Paramount Studios was buzzing with the controlled chaos of a major Western production. The Wrecking Crew, Dean Martin's latest film, was shooting its climactic gunfight scene, and the entire set was designed to look like an authentic frontier town, complete with dusty streets, wooden sidewalks, and a saloon that looked like it had been transplanted directly from 1880s Arizona. Dean Martin was 51 years old and at the height of his popularity, but he was also getting tired of being typecast as the smooth, sophisticated entertainer who couldn't possibly be tough enough for serious action roles. The critics constantly dismissed his Western performances as lightweight, suggesting that his natural charm and easygoing persona made him unconvincing as a gunfighter. What the critics didn't know, and what most of Hollywood didn't know, was that Dean Martin had been shooting competitively since he was 12 years old. Growing up in Steubenville, Ohio, he'd learned marksmanship from his father, who'd been a champion marksman in the Army. Dean had continued practicing throughout his career, often spending hours at private shooting ranges, honing skills that he kept as private as his genuine acting ability. John Wayne had come to visit the set that afternoon, partly out of friendship with Dean, and partly out of curiosity about the film. At 61, Wayne was the undisputed king of Western movies, the actor who had defined what an American cowboy looked like for 3 generations of moviegoers. His presence on any Western set was both an honor and a subtle form of intimidation for other actors trying to prove themselves in his genre. Duke, as everyone called him, watched from behind the cameras as Dean filmed a scene where he had to outdraw 3 gunmen in the town's main street. The scene required multiple takes, not because Dean's performance was lacking, but because the director wanted to capture the gunfight from several different angles. During a break between takes, Dean walked over to where Duke was standing, still wearing his costume. Black pants, a dark shirt, and a gun belt that looked authentic enough to have been worn by a real frontier sheriff. "Duke," Dean said, wiping sweat from his forehead with a bandana, "thanks for stopping by. What do you think of the production?" Wayne studied Dean with the appraising look he gave to all actors working in Westerns, measuring them against his own standards of authenticity and toughness. "Looks good, Dean. Real good. But I gotta ask you something." Duke's voice carried that distinctive drawl that had become as much a part of American cinema as the Hollywood sign itself. "All these gunfight scenes, all this quick-draw business, you ever actually handle a real gun? I mean, outside of movie sets?" The question wasn't mean-spirited, but it carried an edge of genuine curiosity mixed with polite skepticism. Duke had seen too many actors who could look convincing on camera but couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with a real weapon. Dean smiled, the same easy smile that had charmed audiences for 20 years, but there was something different behind his eyes, something that suggested Wayne's question had touched on a subject that Dean took more seriously than most people realized. "Well, Duke, I've done a little shooting here and there, nothing too serious." Wayne nodded, the response confirming what he'd expected. Hollywood was full of actors who claimed to be able to handle weapons but had never fired anything more dangerous than a cap gun. "No offense intended," Duke said. "It's just that real gunfighting is different from movie gunfighting. Real guns have weight. Real bullets have consequences. Takes years to develop a real skill with a handgun." Dean's smile widened, and he glanced around the set at the crew members who were preparing for the next shot. Several of them were listening to the conversation between the 2 legends, sensing that something interesting was developing. "You know what, Duke? You're absolutely right about real guns being different from movie guns. In fact, I'd be curious to see how my real shooting compares to yours." Wayne's eyebrows rose slightly. "You suggesting some kind of competition?" "Just a friendly contest, nothing serious. But I noticed there's a shooting range about 10 minutes from here. We could settle this question of real guns versus movie guns pretty easily." The conversation was attracting more attention now. The film's director, Phil Carlson, had approached to see what was happening between his star and the visiting legend. Several crew members had stopped their work to listen. Wayne looked at Dean with new interest. Most actors would have backed down from such a challenge, especially when issued by someone of Duke's reputation and experience. But Dean seemed genuinely confident, almost eager. "You sure about this, partner? I've been shooting competitively for 30 years, won a few contests in my time. Wouldn't want you to embarrass yourself in front of your crew." "I think I can handle a little embarrassment," Dean replied. "Besides, what's the point of making Western movies if we can't settle disputes like real cowboys?" Phil Carlson looked between the two men, recognizing the potential for either great publicity or great disaster. "Gentlemen, we do have a schedule to maintain." 30 minutes, Dean said to Wayne. "Quick trip to the range, settle this question, and we're back for the afternoon shoot. What do you say, Duke?" Wayne studied Dean's face for a long moment, looking for any sign of uncertainty or bluff. What he saw was quiet confidence and genuine challenge. After 40 years in Hollywood, Duke had developed good instincts about people, and something told him that Dean Martin might be more than he appeared to be. "All right, Martin, you got yourself a contest, but don't say I didn't warn you." 20 minutes later, a small convoy of cars pulled into the parking lot of West Valley Shooting Range, a private facility that catered to serious marksmen and occasionally to Hollywood productions that needed authentic firearms training. The range was owned by a former Marine named Jake Sullivan, who had worked as a technical advisor on several Western films and knew both Dean and Duke by reputation. Word had spread quickly among the film crew, and despite Carlson's protests about schedule, nearly 20 people had followed the two stars to witness what was being called the showdown of the century. Jake Sullivan met them at the entrance, clearly excited about hosting such famous visitors, but also concerned about maintaining the safety protocols that were sacred at his range. "Gentlemen, welcome. I understand you want to settle some kind of dispute." "Just a friendly shooting contest," Wayne explained. "Standard target shooting. Best accuracy wins." Sullivan nodded and led them to the range, where he set up 2 lanes side by side. The targets were standard bullseyes at 25 yards, the distance commonly used for handgun competition. "What weapons are we using?" Dean asked. Wayne gestured toward a gun case that Sullivan had brought out. "Real guns, not movie props. I'd suggest the Smith & Wesson .38 Specials. They're standard law enforcement weapons, good for accuracy testing." Dean examined the revolver that Sullivan handed him, checking the weight, the balance, the feel of the grip in his hand. His movements were casual but practiced, the gestures of someone who had handled firearms thousands of times. Wayne noticed the way Dean held the weapon and felt his first stirring of uncertainty. Most actors were awkward with real guns, treating them like foreign objects. Dean handled the .38 like it was an extension of his hand. Sullivan explained the rules. 6 shots each, best total score wins. The targets were marked in concentric circles, with the bullseye worth 10 points, working down to 1 point for the outer ring. "You want to go first, Duke?" Dean asked. Wayne took his position at the firing line, assuming the classic marksman stance he had learned in the Marine Corps and refined through decades of competitive shooting. The range fell silent except for the distant hum of the ventilation system. Duke's first shot hit the 8 ring, solid, respectable shooting. His second shot caught the 9 ring. His confidence grew as he settled into the familiar rhythm of competitive shooting. Third shot, fourth shot, fifth shot, all consistent, all demonstrating the skill that had made him a respected marksman throughout Hollywood and beyond. His 6th and final shot hit the bullseye, a perfect 10 that drew appreciative murmurs from the watching crew members. Sullivan called out Duke's score. 53 points. "Very impressive shooting, Mr. Wayne." Wayne stepped back from the firing line with the satisfaction of someone who had just demonstrated exactly the skill level he'd claimed to possess. He'd shot well, better than well. He'd shot like the experienced marksman he was, and he felt confident that he'd proven his point about the difference between movie cowboys and real shooters. "Your turn, Dean," Wayne said, his tone friendly but carrying the confidence of someone who believed the contest was already decided. Dean stepped up to the firing line and took his position, but instead of the wide stance and extended arms that Wayne had used, Dean adopted a more relaxed posture, almost casual in its appearance. He held the revolver in a modified grip that looked unorthodox compared to traditional competitive shooting techniques. The crew members exchanged glances. Dean's stance didn't look like the form taught in shooting schools or used by law enforcement. It looked improvised, possibly even amateurish compared to Wayne's textbook technique. Dean's first shot rang out, and Sullivan immediately called, "10! Bullseye!" Wayne's confidence faltered slightly, but he told himself it was beginner's luck. One good shot didn't make a marksman. Dean's second shot. 10! Another bullseye! Now the range was completely silent. 2 perfect shots in a row was beyond luck, but it still could have been coincidence. Dean's third shot. 10! Wayne stared at the target, then at Dean, who was shooting with the same relaxed, almost nonchalant posture he'd started with. There was no tension in his shoulders, no visible effort or concentration. He might have been shooting at tin cans in his backyard for all the stress he was showing. Dean's fourth shot. 10! The crew members were looking at each other in amazement. 4 perfect shots was the kind of shooting that professional competitive marksmen achieved on their best days. Dean's fifth shot. 10! Wayne couldn't believe what he was seeing. 5 consecutive bullseyes was shooting that belonged in professional competitions, not in friendly contests between actors, and Dean was making it look effortless, like the most natural thing in the world. Dean paused before his final shot, glanced over at Wayne with that same easy smile and said, "Sorry about this, Duke." His 6th shot. 10. Perfect score, 60 points. The silence on the range was profound. Dean had just shot a perfect score, 6 consecutive bullseyes, with the casual ease of someone who had been doing it his entire life. Sullivan was the first to speak. "Mr. Martin, that was some of the finest handgun shooting I've ever witnessed. That's professional-level marksmanship." Dean set the revolver down on the counter and turned to face Wayne, who was staring at him with a mixture of shock, respect, and genuine admiration. "Duke, I should probably tell you something. I've been shooting competitively since I was 12 years old. Won the Ohio State Championship 3 years running when I was a teenager. I keep it quiet because it doesn't fit with the image, but I spend about 10 hours a week at shooting ranges around Los Angeles." Wayne walked over to Dean and extended his hand, his face showing the kind of genuine respect that he reserved for people who had truly earned it. "Dean, I have to apologize. I made assumptions about you based on your public persona, and I was completely wrong. That was some of the finest shooting I've ever seen." "No apology needed, Duke. People see what they expect to see. I've learned that it's often useful to be underestimated." Wayne nodded slowly, understanding flooding across his face. "That's why your Western performances are so good. You're not acting like a gunfighter. You actually are one." The crew members who had witnessed the contest were buzzing with excitement and disbelief. They had just seen one of the most surprising demonstrations of hidden talent in Hollywood history. As they drove back to the studio, Wayne rode with Dean, still processing what he'd witnessed. "Dean, can I ask you something? With shooting skills like that, why do you let the critics dismiss your Western performances?" Dean shrugged, that characteristic gesture that made everything seem effortless. "Same reason I don't tell people I can handle a gun. Sometimes it's more effective to surprise people than to impress them up front." "But don't you want recognition for what you can really do?" Dean smiled. "Duke, I get all the recognition I need from the people who matter. The critics who dismiss me don't understand that entertainment and authenticity aren't opposites. I can be smooth and tough at the same time." Wayne was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, I think I learned something today, about not judging people by their image." "What's that?" "That the most dangerous man in any room might be the one who doesn't look dangerous." Years later, when John Wayne was interviewed about Dean Martin, he always told the story of the shooting contest. "Dean Martin," Wayne would say, "is one of the finest marksmen I've ever known, and one of the most authentic actors I've ever worked with. He taught me never to confuse style with substance." The story became part of Hollywood legend, passed down among actors and crew members as a reminder that talent often comes in unexpected packages, and that the most impressive skills are sometimes the most quietly held. If this story of hidden talent and earned respect inspired you, Make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with anyone who needs to know that you should never judge someone's abilities by their image. Have you ever surprised people with a hidden skill they didn't expect? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible stories about the unexpected depths of Hollywood's greatest legends.